She had always been the quiet one in the marriage. Not weak, not unsure, just quiet. From the very beginning, she believed that love did not need to be loud. She believed that if two people respected each other, there was no need to compete or prove anything. So she chose patience again and again, even when patience slowly became loneliness. They met when life was simple. He was ambitious, full of big talk and bigger dreams. He liked to tell people where he would be in 5 years, 10 years, even 20. She listened more than she spoke. She admired his confidence and believed in his plans. When he failed, she stood by him. When he struggled, she adjusted her own life to support his. At that time, money was tight. They lived in small rented places, moved often, and counted every expense. She never complained. What he never fully noticed was that, while he chased visible success, she worked quietly in the background. She spent long nights on her laptop, reading, researching, and building something of her own. When he asked what she was doing, she would simply say she was working on ideas. He didn't ask more. To him, her work didn't seem important. It didn't make noise. It didn't impress his friends. So he ignored it. As years passed, his career began to improve. Not dramatically, but enough to change his attitude. He started dressing better, speaking louder, and acting as if he had finally proven himself to the world. With that change came distance. He no longer asked her opinion. He no longer listened the way he once did. Slowly, respect turned into habit, and habit turned into irritation. She noticed the change early. She felt it in the way he spoke to her, short and sharp. She felt it when he stopped coming home on time, when conversations became arguments, and when silence filled the space where care used to live. Still, she tried. She believed marriages went through seasons. She thought this was just a hard one. But then the mocking began. It was subtle at first. Jokes about how she didn't earn real money, comments about how she lived too simply, small laughs when others asked what she did for a living. Each remark felt like a tiny cut, not enough to bleed, but enough to hurt. She never corrected him, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to. She believed that if he truly cared, he would know her value without needing proof. She didn't realize that his pride had already replaced his care. As his confidence grew, his kindness shrank. He began to treat her like someone who depended on him, even though the truth was the opposite. When arguments happened, he would remind her of the house he paid for, trips he funded, and the lifestyle he believed he provided. He spoke as if she owed him something for simply being his wife. Inside, she felt a quiet sadness. Not anger, not regret, just sadness. She had protected her success to protect the marriage, never imagining the marriage would collapse because of that very silence. The breaking point came on an ordinary evening. No shouting. No dramatic fight. Just a conversation at the dinner table that felt colder than anything before it. He spoke about separation as if he were discussing a business. Decision got calm, calculated, almost relieved. He said they had grown apart. He said she was holding him back. He said he needed someone who could match his level. Each word landed heavily, but she did not cry. She listened. She nodded. And when he finished, she quietly agreed. That calm response confused him. He expected begging. He expected fear. He expected resistance. Instead, he saw acceptance. To him, that meant she had nothing to fight with. From that moment on, he treated the divorce as a victory already won. He told friends that it would be quick and easy. He joked that she would walk away with nothing. He said she was lucky he was being generous. His words carried confidence. But underneath them was something uglier, belief that he was superior. She moved out without drama, took only what she needed. No expensive items, no visible signs of wealth, just clothes, books, and personal things. To anyone watching, she looked like someone starting over with very little. What no one saw were the accounts she never talked about, the companies she quietly built, the long-term investments made years ago when no one was paying attention to her. She had learned early that privacy was power, and she had protected that power even from the man she loved. As the divorce process began, his behavior grew worse. He mocked her choices. He laughed at her lawyer, assuming the case would be simple. He spoke loudly about how she had never contributed. Every time he said it, she remained silent. Not because it was true, but because she didn't need to defend herself. Friends advised her to speak up, to show proof. To scare him early? She refused. She wanted the truth to come out naturally, in the right place, at the right time. She believed that rushing the reveal would turn strength into arrogance. And she was not arrogant. At night alone in her new place, she reflected on the years they spent together. She didn't hate him. She didn't wish him harm. She simply accepted that he never truly saw her. And that realization hurt more than the divorce itself. She thought about all the times she had chosen silence to keep peace. All the times she had hidden her success to protect his pride. In the end, that same pride had destroyed what they built. Still, she did not feel defeated. There was a calm certainty inside her, a sense that she had survived harder things than this. She had built herself from nothing once. She could walk away again, whole and unbroken. As the court date approached, he became more confident, more careless. He bragged openly. He joked that she would regret leaving. He assumed the law would favor him, just as life always seemed to. She watched him from a distance, noticing how little he had changed on the inside. He still measured worth by appearance, still believed power needed to be loud, still underestimated the quiet. The stage was set, though no one realized it yet. What he saw as the final chapter of a weak marriage was only the beginning of a truth that would shock everyone involved. For now, she waited, calm, patient, ready. And as the first day of the divorce proceedings drew closer, one thing was clear, even if only to her. This story was not about loss. It was about revelation. The first day inside the courthouse felt heavier than she expected, not because of fear, but because of memories. The hallway smelled of old paper and polished floors. People walked past with files in their hands, faces tight with worry or anger. She moved slowly, holding her bag close, breathing steadily. This was not a place anyone dreamed of being, yet here she was, calm on the outside, steady on the inside. He arrived late, loud even before entering the room. His voice echoed down the hallway as he joked with his lawyer. He looked confident, almost excited, like this was just another meeting he would easily win. When he saw her sitting quietly on the bench, he smirked. Not a smile of kindness, but one of superiority. He nodded as if acknowledging someone far below him. She stood when he approached. She greeted him politely. Her tone was neutral, respectful. That alone seemed to annoy him. He expected tension. He expected bitterness. Instead, he got calm. To him, calm looked like weakness. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere changed. The judge sat high above, unreadable and firm. Lawyers shuffled papers. The sound of chairs scraping the floor filled the room. She took her seat without fuss. He leaned back, arms crossed, looking relaxed, even bored. When the case began, his lawyer spoke first. The words were sharp and confident. They painted a picture of a man who carried the marriage financially and emotionally, a man who had given everything while receiving little in return. He was described as the provider, the supporter, the one who built a life. She was described as someone who benefited from that. Life without adding much of her own. As those words floated through the room, he nodded along, occasionally smiling. At one point, he let out a small laugh. Not loud, but enough to be heard. A laugh filled with pride. She listened quietly. Her hands rested in her lap. Her face showed no anger, no shame, only attention. When it was her turn to speak, her lawyer kept things simple. He talked about shared years, shared decisions, and shared responsibilities. No drama, no big claims, just facts. She did not interrupt. She did not add emotion. She trusted the process that seemed to frustrate him. During a short break, he leaned toward her and spoke in a low voice. He said she was wasting time. He said she should be grateful for whatever he offered. He said court was expensive, and she couldn't afford to fight for long. His tone was mocking, almost playful, as if he enjoyed reminding her of what he believed was her position. She looked at him and said nothing, just a brief nod. That silence annoyed him more than any argument could have. As the sessions continued over the next few days, his behavior grew bolder. He rolled his eyes when her lawyer spoke. He whispered comments under his breath. Once, when financial matters were mentioned, he laughed openly and said she had nothing worth discussing. The room went quiet for a moment, but no one corrected him. Each time, she remained composed. People began to notice, not because she was dramatic, but because she wasn't. In a room filled with tension, her calm stood out. Outside the courtroom, rumors began to form. Friends of his repeated his version of the story, that she was dependent, that she would struggle, that she would soon realize her mistake. Some even said she married above her level and was now paying the price. She heard these things through others. She did not respond. She had learned long ago that defending yourself against false beliefs only gives them life. Truth, she believed, always arrived on its own. At home she spent evenings alone, not in sadness, but in reflection. She reviewed documents quietly, old records, statements, agreements. She organized everything carefully. Each paper was a piece of a long journey, one that began years before she ever met him. She remembered the nights she stayed awake learning new skills, the early investments that scared her at first, the risks she took when failure was a real possibility. She remembered choosing to keep her work separate from her marriage, not out of secrecy, but safety. She wanted love, not competition. Those choices had shaped everything. Back in court, the judge requested detailed financial disclosures from both sides. His lawyer submitted documents confidently. Salaries, assets, property, everything neatly laid out. He looked proud, like he was showing off his achievements. When it came time for her disclosure, there was a pause. Her lawyer requested more time, explained that her finances were complex and long-term. The word complex caught everyone's attention. He leaned forward. For the first time, a small crack appeared in his confidence. He whispered something to his lawyer. His lawyer nodded but looked slightly uncomfortable. Still, he brushed it off. Later in the hallway, he joked loudly that she was trying to delay the inevitable. He said she was pretending to have more than she did. He said people like her always tried tricks when cornered. She walked past him without looking back. The next session focused on contributions during the marriage. He spoke openly this time. He described her as passive, someone who relied on his direction. He said she avoided responsibility, said he carried the weight while she enjoyed the benefits. The judge listened carefully. Occasionally, the judge looked at her, studying her reactions. Each time, the judge saw the same quiet strength, steady eyes, no fear. When asked to respond, she spoke briefly. Her voice was calm, clear, and respectful. She said she believed both of them contributed in different ways. She said she never measured worth by money alone. She said she valued support, trust, and partnership. He scoffed. The sound echoed more loudly than he intended. A few people turned to look at him. The judge raised an eyebrow but said nothing. That moment shifted something, subtle but real. Over the following days, the tone of the courtroom changed. Not dramatically, but enough to be felt. His confidence became louder, more forced. Her calm became more noticeable, more intentional. It was as if he needed to prove something, while she needed nothing. Privately, he began pressuring her to settle quickly. He sent messages through lawyers offering what he called fair terms. The terms were heavily in his favor. He assumed she would accept to avoid stress. He underestimated her patience. She declined politely. That refusal angered him. He began telling people she was greedy, that she was trying to take what she didn't earn. He spoke as if the story was already written, casting himself as the victim, but the law moved forward, step by step, indifferent to his opinions. One evening, after a long day in court, she sat by the window of her apartment and watched the city lights. She felt tired but not broken. She thought about how easy it would have been to reveal everything early, to shock him, to end his mocking quickly. But she knew better. She wasn't there to teach him a lesson. She was there to close a chapter with dignity. As the next hearing approached, the judge requested a deeper review of her financial history. International records, long-term investments, ownership details. The request alone caused a stir. His lawyer's tone changed. Less confident, more cautious. He noticed it. For the first time since the divorce began, doubt entered his eyes. Just for a second. Then he covered it with laughter and arrogance, as if pretending would make it disappear. She saw that moment clearly, and she understood something important. The truth was close now, not because she pushed it forward, but because it could no longer stay hidden. And as the courtroom prepared for the next phase, one thing became certain. The mocking, the laughter, the confidence built on false assumptions, all of it, was about to face reality. The courtroom was quiet that morning, but the tension in the air was heavy. Everyone sensed something different was coming. The lawyers filed papers slowly, deliberately, and she followed every detail carefully. She had spent years preparing for this moment without anyone knowing. Now, the moment had quietly arrived. Her lawyer stood first. He handed the judge a thick file, one that contained documents no one expected. The pages were neat, organized, and full of numbers, letters, and agreements that spanned decades. As the judge began flipping through them, the atmosphere in the room subtly shifted. The air that once belonged to his confidence now belonged to questions and surprise. He leaned back in his chair, still smiling, trying to appear unaffected. He whispered to his lawyer, joking about how she must have had someone helping her. But his voice carried doubt this time. The documents were not just records. They were proof of something larger than anyone had imagined. As the judge read further, it became clear. She had built an empire quietly, with patience and intelligence. Small investments years ago had grown into substantial holdings. Properties in multiple countries, stocks in companies he had never heard of. Her name appeared as a major stakeholder in several businesses, all completely legal and meticulously documented. Offshore accounts, long-term bonds, and retirement plans, all under her control. The kind of wealth that could change the story completely. The courtroom went silent. Even the reporters in the gallery sensed the shift. Some whispered to each other, unsure if they had heard correctly. His confident smile faltered. He tried to joke under his breath, but the words sounded hollow. He leaned closer to his lawyer, muttering things she could not hear, but everyone could see the change. For years, she had lived simply, never flaunting what she earned. She had wanted to protect the marriage, not to hide superiority. She wanted to love him without introducing competition. But that decision had been misinterpreted as weakness. Now, her silence became the proof of strength he had never understood. When the judge asked for clarification on certain accounts, she answered calmly. She explained her investments, her businesses, and her choices. She spoke plainly, without arrogance, without boasting. Just facts. Numbers that spoke louder than words ever could. The more she spoke, the more the room adjusted to the truth. What had seemed impossible to believe moments ago became undeniable. Her net worth was in the billions. She did not need to defend her position with anger. The documents alone carried the weight of her life's work. He was stunned. For the first time, he seemed genuinely small. His voice, once loud and mocking, faltered. His lawyer whispered frantically, flipping through papers to find something to counteract the proof, but there was nothing. Every attempt to undermine her position failed. Every claim he made in the past suddenly sounded foolish, even cruel. Outside the courtroom, whispers began spreading. Friends and colleagues had already started calling, asking for details, sharing what they could see in the public record. The man who mocked her for years now faced embarrassment that could not be ignored. He had assumed the world would see her as powerless. Instead, the world began to see her as unstoppable. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction in watching his confidence crumble. She felt calm, steady, a sense of completion. The court was not about revenge. It was about truth. She had never asked for recognition, yet it had arrived on its own. Over the next several days, more financial documents were reviewed. Properties, Stocks and accounts were examined by independent auditors. Each finding added another layer to what everyone now understood. Her wealth was not inherited, it was earned. It was the result of years of careful work, strategic thinking, and patience. Each decision, each investment, each risk had been deliberate. He began to speak less in court. His earlier arrogance faded into nervous explanations. He tried to claim contributions that were small compared to hers. He tried to say she exaggerated her involvement in businesses. But every time he spoke, the judge and auditors had evidence to contradict him. His words became weaker, less credible. Even his supporters started to notice. Friends who once agreed with him now hesitated. Some whispered privately, wondering how they had misjudged her for so long. The ridicule he had used so freely in the past now reflected back on him. He had mocked someone who had been quietly building power while he focused on appearances. She continued to listen, never interrupting. She maintained her composure, answering questions succinctly. Her calmness made her appear even stronger. It became clear to everyone that she had planned nothing to humiliate him. She had only protected herself, her work, and her dignity. That distinction mattered. Her approach was human, not calculated for drama. She did not gloat. She did not make threats. Yet the room could feel the impact. Her strength was quiet, rooted in years of patience and resilience. In contrast, his loud confidence now seemed fragile, built on assumptions rather than knowledge. After the review, the judge asked both parties to discuss settlement possibilities. He expected her to be intimidated, to agree to a quick resolution that favored him. She did not. She was calm and clear about fairness, not about winning. That distinction frustrated him more than anything else. He realized too late that she had always been on equal footing. As the court adjourned for the day, she walked out slowly. She paused for a moment, looking back at the room that had held so much tension. She had never felt the need to prove herself before, but now the world had no choice but to recognize her. Her work, her patience, her intelligence, everything had mattered. Meanwhile, Hugh left hurriedly, avoiding reporters and witnesses. He realized that mockery and arrogance could not protect him. The image he had built, both in his mind and in the eyes of others, was shattered. He had underestimated her for years. Every word he had spoken during the divorce, every joke, every insult, now seemed foolish and cruel. The next day, news of the revelations began spreading quietly through the media. Reporters wrote about her calm composure, her hidden wealth, and her quiet strength. Colleagues and acquaintances began seeing her in a new light. She was no longer just the woman who had been mocked. She was a symbol of resilience and intelligence, someone who had navigated life carefully and successfully. He noticed the change too, though he tried to hide it. His friends began asking awkward questions. Some avoided him altogether. His confidence, once a shield, now felt exposed. He had mocked her under the assumption of ignorance. That assumption had been entirely wrong. She returned to her apartment that evening and allowed herself a deep breath. She did not feel pride or vindication. She felt clarity. She had survived years of being underestimated, years of quiet work, and years of being misjudged. The truth had a way of emerging, and it always had its own power. She reflected on the irony. The man who had mocked her had built his confidence on the idea that she was powerless. She had never contested that image because she believed in love and patience, not confrontation. Yet those very qualities, the calm, the patience, the intelligence, had been her true power all along. Over the following week, she reviewed more documents with her lawyer. She made sure that every detail was accurate, every record verifiable. She wanted the court to see reality, not exaggeration. Her life's work could stand on its own. She did not need drama to prove its value. He continued to struggle privately with the reality of her wealth. His earlier jokes and insults haunted him. He realized that every mocking comment he had made now seemed like evidence of his arrogance. People who had laughed at her with him now started questioning his judgment. His social standing, carefully maintained over years, felt fragile. She noticed none of this. She focused on her own life, her own future. She thought about how easy it would have been to reveal her wealth in private emails or dramatic statements. But she had chosen not to. She had allowed truth to emerge naturally, without spectacle. By the end of the week, the courtroom atmosphere had completely shifted. Where once his arrogance dominated, now respect salant, undeniable respect belonged to her. Not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it through years of patient work and unwavering calm. She understood something crucial. The court was only a reflection of life itself. People often judge what they see, not what exists. But truth, when revealed, cannot be ignored. And those who mock or underestimate often find themselves humbled. Whether they are ready or not, as the next phase of the divorce approached, both parties knew that the story had changed completely. He would have to adjust to face reality, to reckon with the consequences of years of arrogance. She, on the other hand, felt ready for whatever came next. She had walked this path quietly for years, and now the world was finally beginning to see what she had built. Her calm, her patience, and her intelligence had turned what could have been humiliation into power. She had never needed to shout to prove herself. She had only needed to wait for the right moment. And that moment had come. Even as the courtroom prepared for further discussions, one truth was undeniable. No one who underestimated her would ever do so again. Her life, her choices, and her quiet strength spoke louder than words ever could. And for the first time, he realized he had underestimated not just her wealth, but her wisdom, her patience, and her unshakable dignity. The courtroom felt different that morning. Where once his confidence had dominated the room, now there was tension in every step he took. The man who had mocked her repeatedly, who had assumed he held all the power, now seemed cautious, almost fragile. He tried to smile, tried to joke, but the words sounded forced. Those around him noticed the change, including the lawyers, the judge, and the small audience who had come to watch the proceedings. She entered quietly, calm as always, carrying nothing more than a folder of her documents. Her composure was deliberate, but not calculated. It was the kind of calm that comes from knowing who you are and what you have worked for. She did not need to announce her power. Everyone could already feel it. The judge called the session to order. The first discussion was about the settlement terms. His lawyer spoke first, attempting to steer the process in his favor. He repeated the arguments from previous days that she had benefited from the marriage, that her contributions were minimal, that the assets he claimed should remain mostly with him. His voice, once sharp and mocking, now wavered occasionally. He was conscious of the documents that proved otherwise. When it was her turn, she spoke calmly, without exaggeration or anger. She outlined her expectations for a fair settlement, emphasizing honesty, responsibility, and justice rather than revenge. Her words were simple, clear, and unwavering. They carried a weight that no mockery could diminish. She did not demand humiliation or punishment for him. She only requested fairness. The tension in the room increased. He shifted in his chair, trying to regain control. But every claim he made was met with documented evidence of her contributions, her assets, and her independence. Every time he tried to interrupt, the judge maintained order, insisting that she be allowed to speak. Each pause, each calm word from her, chipped away at the confidence he had once displayed so effortlessly. During a break, he whispered to his lawyer in frustration, "I can't believe this. She's lying, or someone helped her. This isn't possible." His lawyer shook his head, clearly uncomfortable, but offered no solution. For the first time, he realized that he was out of his depth. He had mocked someone who had been quietly preparing for this moment for years. Outside the courtroom, reporters and friends began talking quietly. Some were shocked at the revelation of her wealth. Others were impressed by her composure. The man who had tried to control the narrative was now struggling to maintain credibility. Those who had believed his earlier claims started questioning their judgment. His arrogance, which had once inspired confidence in some, now felt like hubris. Inside, she remained composed. She reflected on the irony of the situation. Years of being underestimated, of being mocked for simplicity, had culminated in a moment where truth spoke louder than any words. She had never sought recognition, yet it arrived on its own, undeniable and powerful. The next part of the session focused on legal details. But it also brought personal realizations for him. His attempts to negotiate heavily in his favor failed repeatedly. His lawyer tried adjusting figures, proposing settlements that were fairer on paper, but still leaned toward him. Each proposal was politely declined. She did not argue, she simply pointed out facts and evidence. Her calmness amplified the clarity of her position. In private, he began to feel the weight of his earlier arrogance. The laughter he had used to belittle her, the mockery he had made to friends. The confidence he displayed in court now seemed foolish and short-sighted. People who had supported him quietly started to distance themselves, unsure of what to believe. The humiliation of realizing he had been wrong to mock her was growing with each passing hour. Her friends, however, saw a different side of the story. They had always known her strength, but watching her handle the situation in court was inspiring. They were amazed at how she maintained dignity under pressure, never letting frustration or anger dictate her actions. Her resilience became evident to everyone, a lesson in patience and quiet power. As days passed, the process continued. The judge requested detailed reviews of her international assets, her business holdings, and investments. Each review reinforced the truth. Her wealth was not inherited, not borrowed, not temporary. It was earned. Every step she had taken over the years, every calculated decision, every quiet risk had been intentional. She had built a future while he had mocked her in the present. He tried to find small victories, but even those moments were fleeting. Every argument he raised was countered by evidence, by facts, by the clear demonstration of her intelligence and planning. Even his lawyer, seasoned and strategic, had little to counterbalance the reality in front of them. Outside the courtroom, whispers turned to quiet discussions. People began to admire her patience and strategy. Some even felt embarrassed for having believed the earlier narrative that he had built. He, meanwhile, faced private moments of regret. The mockery that had once seemed harmless now felt like a reflection of his own ignorance. She, however, focused on herself. She did not gloat or seek revenge. She knew that vindication was not about humiliating others, but about standing firm in truth. Her calm approach contrasted with his increasingly desperate attempts to maintain a facade of control. The irony was not lost on her. Years of being underestimated had prepared her for this moment in ways he could never anticipate. One afternoon, during a particularly tense session, the judge paused and looked directly at him. "Do you understand the full extent of these documents?" The question hung in the air. He hesitated, searching for a response, but found none that could address the overwhelming evidence. His previous mockery echoed silently in the room. Every laugh, every dismissive comment, had been directed at someone far more capable than he had ever imagined. She remained composed, answering questions with clarity, offering explanations when needed, and never raising her voice. Her calmness in the face of scrutiny only reinforced the reality of her achievements. People watching began to understand that her strength was quiet, consistent, and real. At the end of the day, as the courtroom emptied, he remained behind for a moment, staring at the papers and documents that had revealed so much. He could no longer pretend ignorance. The truth was undeniable. The woman he had mocked for years was not only independent, but had built a life, a wealth, and a reputation that surpassed anything he had imagined. Meanwhile, she walked out calmly, not rushing, not needing to flaunt her victory. She felt only peace. The court had recognized her truth, not because she demanded it, but because it was undeniable. Her patience, her hard work, and her restraint had created a reality that could no longer be ignored. Over the next few days, negotiations continued, but they were different now. He was quieter, more cautious, and less certain. His friends, his lawyers, and even casual observers began noticing the shift. The arrogance that had once defined him was gone, replaced by a nervous awareness of how much he had underestimated her. She, on the other hand, continued her routine. She focused on the details of the case, on her documents, and on maintaining her calm presence. Her mind was clear. Her intentions were simple: fairness, honesty, and dignity. She did not seek revenge or humiliation. That strength, understated yet undeniable, had turned the tide completely in her favor. One evening, after a long day in court, she sat quietly in her apartment, reflecting on the journey. She thought about the years of being underestimated, of being mocked, and of quietly building her life while maintaining patience. Every moment had led to this point. The power of her work and the strength of her calm had finally been recognized. He, in contrast, faced the reality of his choices. The mockery, the arrogance, and the assumptions he had made about her now seemed foolish. He realized, perhaps too late, that he had been wrong to dismiss her, wrong to underestimate her, and wrong to believe that silence was weakness. The truth had a way of emerging, and in this case, it emerged with undeniable force. She had protected herself without confrontation, maintained dignity without drama, and revealed strength without arrogance. Her life, her choices, and her calm presence had transformed the courtroom into a place where honesty and patience finally mattered more than loud confidence. And as the days moved forward, it became clear to everyone involved, those who mock, underestimate, or dismiss others often find themselves humbled. Those who build quietly, act patiently, and maintain dignity eventually reveal a power that cannot be ignored. She had walked that path, and now the world was beginning to see her for who she truly was: strong, capable, and unshakably resilient. The final day of the proceedings arrived quietly, without fanfare. The courtroom, which had seen tension, mockery, and disbelief, now felt different. There was a sense of finality in the air, a quiet acknowledgement that what had been unfolding for weeks had reached a point where nothing could be reversed. People entered slowly, taking seats, some whispering, others watching in curiosity. She arrived calm, dressed simply, carrying only what she needed. Her presence alone seemed to settle the room. She did not look triumphant, only focused and composed. She understood that this day was not about proving herself to anyone, but about closing a chapter of her life with clarity and dignity. He entered with a slower pace than usual. His confident stride had been replaced with a careful, almost measured walk. He greeted no one. The smirk that once defined him was gone. He had faced the documents, the evidence, the undeniable proof of her work, her intelligence, and her wealth. That mockery and arrogance, once so natural to him, had been stripped away by the truth he had refused to see for so long. The judge called the court to order and asked if both parties were ready to finalize the settlement. There was no tension in her voice, only a quiet firmness. She listened as the lawyers spoke, as numbers and figures were outlined. She corrected nothing unnecessarily, allowed the facts to speak for themselves, and simply made sure that everything was clear and fair. He tried to speak at times, interjecting, offering objections, or attempting to influence the figures. But each attempt was met with calm clarity. Her lawyer countered each objection with evidence, and she reinforced it when necessary. Every argument he had relied upon in the past had been dismantled, not with anger, but with facts. Outside the courtroom, whispers grew. People who had followed the case were beginning to understand the scale of her accomplishments. They spoke in hushed tones about her patience, her intelligence, and her dignity. The man who had mocked her now seemed smaller in comparison. His pride had been replaced with a hesitant awareness of the truth. She reflected quietly during brief pauses. This journey had not been about money or revenge. It had been about her life, her choices, and the strength she had maintained throughout. She had endured ridicule, underestimated her whole life, and faced someone who thought himself superior. Yet she had remained true to herself. That truth, calm and unshakable, had carried her to this moment. The final settlement was laid out. Figures were reviewed carefully, and agreements were signed. She did not ask for extravagance. She did not ask to humiliate. She asked for fairness, for acknowledgement of her contributions, and for freedom to continue her life without interference. The court recognized her position fully. The documents, the evidence, and her calm presence had ensured that. He sat quietly during the signing. The man who once mocked, laughed, and belittled her had little left to say. His lawyers whispered in his ear, But even they seemed subdued, aware that the reality of her strength could not be denied. He realized fully what he had underestimated for so long. As the papers were finalized, she gathered her things slowly. There was no rush, no dramatic gesture. She left the courtroom with the same quiet dignity she had carried from the beginning. People noticed the contrast. Where she walked calmly and confidently, he appeared uneasy and diminished. That contrast alone told a story. Outside, the city continued as it always did, unaware of the personal battles that had played out within those walls. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath of cold morning air. She allowed herself a small smile, not of triumph, but of relief. The chapter had closed. Her patience, her resilience, and her intelligence had carried her through. She had emerged with her dignity intact. The man, on the other hand, faced quiet reflection. The arrogance he had carried into the divorce, the mocking words, the laughter at her perceived weakness, all of it, now weighed on him. He had underestimated someone who had quietly built power, knowledge, and wealth while maintaining humility and calm. He realized, perhaps too late, that the mockery had been his own undoing. In the days that followed, she focused on herself. She returned to her work, her investments, her passions, and the life she had built over the years. The freedom she had fought for quietly allowed her to continue growing. It's not just financially, but personally and emotionally. She chose peace over anger, calm over drama, and clarity over chaos. Friends and colleagues noticed the change as well. They saw not only her wealth, but her strength of character. They began to respect her not for what she owned, but for the patience and intelligence that had allowed her to achieve it without spectacle. She became an example of quiet resilience, of how to endure underestimation and emerge stronger without compromising dignity. He, meanwhile, learned a hard lesson. Mocking someone for simplicity, for quietness, or for patience had left him vulnerable. He had relied on appearances and arrogance, only to be humbled by the reality of her truth. Every laugh he had shared at her expense became a reminder of his misjudgment, yet she did not revel in his discomfort. That was not her way. Her satisfaction came from knowing she had remained true to herself, that she had protected her life and her dignity, and that she had navigated a difficult situation with calm intelligence. She had shown that strength is not loud, and power does not need to be flaunted. Over time, the story of the divorce reached a wider audience. Those who had witnessed or heard of the proceedings admired her resilience and composure. She became an example of how patience, quiet confidence, and intelligence could prevail against arrogance and underestimation. Her story was shared not as a tale of revenge, but as a lesson in dignity, fairness, and the quiet power of truth. She reflected often on what she had learned from the experience. She learned that silence can be a form of strength, that patience can be more powerful than confrontation, and that truth, when presented with calm clarity, can outshine any arrogance or mockery. She had survived not by fighting loudly, but by standing firm, by knowing her worth, and by allowing the evidence of her life to speak for itself. In the months that followed, she focused on her future. She invested in causes she cared about, supported young entrepreneurs quietly, and continued to build her personal and professional life. She did not seek attention, nor did she need it. Her success was not measured by others' recognition, but by the fulfillment she felt from her own choices. The man who had once mocked her faded from public attention gradually. He faced his own challenges, now more aware of the consequences of arrogance and underestimation. He had learned, though perhaps too late, that mocking someone without understanding their true strength is a mistake that carries lasting consequences. She, on the other hand, walked forward freely. The divorce, the court proceedings, and the mocking had all become a part of her story, but not the defining part. The defining part was her resilience, her intelligence, and her ability to remain calm and composed under pressure. She had proven that strength and dignity are far more enduring than anger or arrogance. Her life continued, not as a story of conflict, but as a story of human strength and perseverance. People admired her not because she had wealth, but because she had remained true to herself, had endured underestimation, and had emerged with dignity intact. Her calm, patient approach became an example for others facing challenges, a reminder that quiet strength often speaks louder than words. In the end, the divorce was not about revenge or punishment. It was about truth, fairness, and recognition of her life's work. She walked away with clarity, freedom, and dignity, knowing that she had handled a difficult situation with intelligence, patience, and quiet confidence. Her calm had turned into strength, her patience into power, and her intelligence into undeniable reality. The man who had mocked her realized the true cost of underestimating someone. He faced his own reflection and understood that arrogance and mockery had no place when confronted with quiet, strength, and patient intelligence. She had not sought to humiliate him, but he had learned a lesson regardless, a lesson about respect, about perception, and about the power of being underestimated. Her story became a testament to the strength of human character. It reminded everyone that patience, dignity, and quiet perseverance often achieve more than anger, mockery, or arrogance. She had not needed to announce her power, nor had she needed to raise her voice. She had only needed to remain true to herself, to act with integrity, and to let the truth reveal itself in its own time. And so, she walked forward, free from the past, stronger than ever, carrying with her the lessons of patience, dignity, and resilience. She had endured ridicule, overcome underestimation, and emerged victorious not through loud confrontation, but through calm strength, intelligence, and unwavering confidence. The world had finally seen what she had always known, her worth, her power, and her ability to rise above any challenge. Her life after the divorce was full, not because of the wealth she possessed, but because of the peace she had earned, the dignity she had preserved, and the strength she had maintained. She became a quiet inspiration, a living example that true power does not need to be shouted, and that those who mock or underestimate often find themselves humbled in the face of calm intelligence and unwavering resilience. The lessons of that journey remained clear. Patience, preparation, dignity, and truth are far stronger than arrogance, mockery, or pride. She had lived those lessons fully and emerged, not only victorious, but free, calm, and stronger than ever before. And in that quiet victory lay the greatest triumph of all a life lived with integrity, strength, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing one's true worth.